When Nora Whitfield walked into the Montgomery Community Hall that warm Alabama evening, nobody paid her much attention at first. She was 61, a retired schoolteacher with kind eyes and a calm grace that came from decades of patience. But when the new police officer stood up to speak, tall, broad-shouldered, 27, with a confident southern drawl, the whole room seemed to shift. His name was Trey Cole, and he spoke about safety, faith, and second chances. After the meeting, he approached her table with a smile that could melt stone. Trey, ma'am, you look like you've seen it all and still found a reason to smile. That's rare these days. Nora, I've taught middle school for 30 years, officer. I had to learn to smile through chaos. That small exchange became the spark of something that felt impossible and yet undeniable. Trey started visiting her often, bringing flowers, fixing her old porch steps, making her laugh again. The neighbors whispered, "What's a young cop doing with a woman old enough to be his mama?" But Trey didn't care. He told everyone, "Age doesn't scare me. Loneliness does." To Nora, those words hit home. She had buried a husband 10 years earlier, lived alone in a quiet house filled with books and fading photographs. Trey made her feel seen again, like the years hadn't erased her womanhood. Within a year, they were married. A simple ceremony under the magnolia trees behind her home, just a few close friends. Nora wore pale blue, not white. She said white was her beginnings, and this love was a second sunrise. For a while, it was everything she dreamed. Trey cooked breakfast before his morning shifts, left sticky notes on her mirror saying, "Don't forget how beautiful you are." They prayed together, laughed together, danced in the living room to old Motown records. But slowly, something changed. The man who once held her hand in public now flinched when she tried to touch him. His late-night calls became more frequent, his stories less believable. When Nora asked who was calling, he'd simply say, "Work never sleeps, baby." Then came the first real crack in their picture-perfect world. Trey started making small remarks about her clothes. Trey, that skirt's a bit short for your age, don't you think? Nora, it's the same one I wore when we met. Trey, yeah, well, people talk. She brushed it off, thinking he was just protective. But soon he wanted to know where she was every hour, checked her phone, questioned every friend who visited. The more she tried to explain herself, the colder he became. At church, Trey was still the charming young sheriff everyone admired. But at home, he was a stranger. When she looked into his eyes, she saw something dark, control mixed with resentment. One night, Nora overheard him on the phone, voice low, sharp. "Don't call me when she's here. I said I'll handle it. Just wait." She froze in the hallway, heart pounding. When he hung up, she slipped quietly back to bed, pretending to be asleep. But her mind raced. Who was he talking to? What was he planning to handle? From that night on, Nora started keeping a small notebook by her bedside, each entry more worried than the last. Times, dates, little things she noticed. Missing money, hidden documents, unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. To the outside world, they were still the miracle couple. Proof that love could bridge any age gap. But behind closed doors, Nora was beginning to realize that her miracle might have been a beautiful mistake. On a Sunday morning, she watched Trey polishing his badge before heading to work. The sunlight glinted off the metal, and she suddenly thought how strange it was that something meant to protect could shine so cold. As the door closed behind him, Nora whispered to herself, "God, what have I got myself into?" And somewhere deep down, she already knew this love wasn't saving her anymore. It was quietly destroying her. That night, Nora couldn't sleep. The house felt too still, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. She walked through each room, her fingers grazing the photographs on the wall, wedding pictures, smiling faces, the life she had prayed for. In every frame, Trey arm was around her shoulders, his smile wide, his eyes glow with something she once believed was devotion. Now she wasn't sure. Still, she couldn't stop loving him. Every morning she brewed his coffee just the way he liked it, black with a spoon of honey, and left it by the window where the sunrise hit his badge. She told herself that if she could just hold on a little longer, Maybe the good days would return. Maybe the laughter, the dances, the warmth in his eyes would come back. But love, she realized, wasn't blind. It was willingly blind. And sometimes the cost of keeping your eyes closed was your soul. The first time Nora truly felt afraid of Treyland was on a Thursday night. He came home past midnight, reeking of whiskey and cheap cologne, his badge still clipped crookedly to his belt. She asked softly, "Nora, rough day, honey?" "Treyland, don't start." His voice was sharper than usual, the kind of tone that left no space for tenderness. He tossed his jacket onto the couch, scrolled through his phone, and disappeared into the shower. The sound of water hitting the tiles drowned out her heartbeat, but not her fear. Over the next few weeks, Nora noticed how little she recognized her husband anymore. He was always somewhere else, his mind, his eyes, his smile. He'd leave for work early, come home late, sometimes not at all. When she called, his phone would go straight to voicemail. One morning, as she was doing laundry, a folded receipt fell out of his jeans pocket. It was from a luxury hotel downtown, dated the same night. He claimed to be at a department conference. The receipt listed 2 glasses of wine and a single queen suite. Her fingers trembled as she stared at it. No, there had to be an explanation. But deep down, the truth was already clawing its way through her denial. That evening, when Treyland walked in, she confronted him. "Nora, you were at the Crescent Hotel last Thursday. Why'd you lie?" Treyland, smirking, "You go through my pockets now." "Nora, I deserve honesty." "Treyland, you deserve peace, Nora. Stop looking for things that aren't there." He kissed her forehead and walked away. The gesture looked gentle, but it felt like an order, like he was saying, "Don't push me." Nora sat in silence long after he'd gone to bed. Outside, cicadas sang their endless summer song, but in her chest there was only dread. Then came the whispers. One of her former students, now a clerk at City Hall, called her late one afternoon. Student, "Mrs. Whitfield, I don't mean to upset you, but people are saying Chief Cole's been flying out of town on taxpayer money to meet someone, a woman, from overseas." That night, Nora waited until Treyland fell asleep before opening his laptop. She wasn't good with technology, but she knew enough to check emails. What she found made her blood run cold. Messages between Treyland and a woman named Amira said, "Full of promises and flirtation. Once the funds come through, we can finally be together. Dubai's waiting, baby. She'll never know. Just keep her calm until I figure things out." The next morning, Nora made herself a cup of coffee and looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked nothing like the one who'd once believed love could heal anything. For days, she acted normal, smiling when he talked, nodding when he bragged about his new police project. But inside, she was planning. Not revenge. Not yet. Just escape. She began quietly transferring small amounts of money from their joint account to her own savings. She cleaned the house, donated clothes, and packed a single suitcase under the pretense of helping a friend organize her move. But Treyland noticed. He always noticed. "Treyland, you've been quiet lately." "Nora," softly, "I'm just tired." "Treyland, tired of what?" "Nora, of walking on eggshells in my own home." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just stared at her, long, hard, unreadable, then said, almost gently, "Treyland, don't make me out to be the bad guy, Nora. You're all I've got." But in his eyes, she saw something she couldn't unsee, a flash of calculation, not love. That night, as he slept, Nora opened her notebook again. Her handwriting shook, but the words were clear. "If anything happens to me, start with Treyland Cole." Check his phone, his bank transfers, and a woman named Amira said. She tore out the page and slipped it into her jewelry box. Then she whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for the courage to finally leave. As dawn broke, golden light spilled across their front yard. To the neighbors, it looked like a perfect morning at the perfect couple's home. But inside, Nora had already made up her mind. She would leave Treyland Cole before his darkness swallowed her whole. The morning Nora left, the air in Montgomery felt heavier than usual. Humid, still, like the world itself was holding its breath. That last night, the house was drowning in silence. Nora sat on the couch, pretending to read, but her eyes never left Treyland. He was pacing the living room, phone in hand, his voice low and sharp. Treyland, I told you, don't call me again. Not tonight. When he noticed her watching, his tone softened instantly. Treyland, work stuff. You know how it is. Nora, I stopped believing that a long time ago. He laughed, a quiet, hollow sound that made her skin crawl. Then he walked over, crouched in front of her, and took her hand. Treyland, you wouldn't ever leave me, right? We promised forever. Nora, after pause, I promise love, not fear. His jaw tightened, eyes darkening, but he said nothing. He kissed her knuckles gently, almost lovingly, then walked upstairs. Nora sat there for hours after he was gone, the clock ticking like a warning. When dawn crept through the curtains, she packed her small suitcase, wrote her letter, and whispered to the empty room. Forgive me, God, but I can't die loving him. Treyland came home from his night shift just after sunrise. The house was silent. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, but there was no sign of her. He called out, Treyland, Nora, you up? No answer. The bedroom was neat, the bed made. The suitcase she'd kept under the bed was gone. On the kitchen counter sat a white envelope with his name written in her graceful cursive, Treyland. He tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I need to leave for a while. Please don't come looking for me. I've been offered an opportunity in Dubai to help start a women's wellness spa. It's time I live for myself again. This isn't goodbye forever. I just need space to breathe. Nora, for a moment, Treyland just stared at it. Then he chuckled, low, cold, humorless. Dubai, he repeated, almost to himself. He crumpled the letter in his fist. That afternoon, he called her sister, pretending to sound distraught. Treyland, she left, just vanished. Said she's going overseas for work. I didn't even know she had plans. Sister, overseas? That doesn't sound like Nora. Treyland, she said she needed to find herself. Maybe I pushed her too hard. To everyone else, he was a grieving husband, a man blindsided by abandonment. But Detective Lisa Grant, who had worked under him for years, noticed something odd when she dropped by to check in. Nora's purse was still hanging by the door. Her passport was in the drawer. Lisa, you said she left for Dubai? Treyland, that's what she wrote. Lisa, without her passport? Treyland, pauses. Maybe she had another one. You know, old habits from her traveling days. Lisa didn't argue, but she wrote it down in her mental notebook. Something wasn't adding up. Over the next few days, Treyland played his role perfectly. He filed a missing person report, gave tearful interviews, and even organized a candlelight vigil downtown. The local news ran the headline, "Beloved teacher missing after sudden trip abroad." He made sure to be front and center for every camera. Reporter, Chief Cole, do you believe she's still alive? Treyland, eyes moist. I have to believe that. Nora's strong. She's always been stronger than me. The public adored him. He was a symbol of devotion, the young husband abandoned by an older woman chasing dreams. But when the cameras turned off, Treyland's charm vanished. Late at night, the neighbors heard noises in the garage, hammering, dragging, running water. When one of them asked the next morning, he smiled politely and said, "Just working on an old motorbike. Helps clear my head." Days turned into weeks. Still no word from Nora. Then one morning, a maintenance worker from the Mobile River Dam called the police after spotting something strange. A large brown suitcase lodged against the rocks near the spillway. It had been ripped open by the current. Inside were 2 human hands and a severed head wrapped in linen. Detective Lisa was among the first on the scene. When she unzipped the bag and saw the silver locket around the neck, her stomach dropped. Inside the locket was a photo of Nora and Treyland on their wedding day. The town went silent that night. The same man who had been on television pleading for his wife's safe return was now the primary suspect in her murder. when they brought Trey Land in for questioning. He didn't flinch. Lisa, you said she was in Dubai. Trey Land, she was... Lisa, then why did we find her head in the river? He leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. Trey Land, you're making a mistake, detective. Someone's setting me up. Lisa stared at him long enough to see something flicker. Guilt, maybe, or arrogance. She couldn't tell. But one thing was certain. The man sitting in front of her wasn't grieving. He was calculating. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth. Nora never made it to Dubai. She never even left the house. As Trey Land walked out of the interrogation room that night, escorted by 2 officers, Lisa whispered to herself, "We'll find out what you did to her, Trey Land. And when we do, you'll wish you drowned with that suitcase." Outside, the Alabama sky turned dark, thunder rolling in the distance, as if even the heavens were preparing for the storm about to come. The news of the suitcase spread through Alabama like wildfire. Human remains found near the Mobile River, possibly linked to missing teacher Nora Whitfield. Every TV station ran the story. Every newspaper printed her smiling photo. But behind the scenes, Detective Lisa Grant couldn't shake the chill running down her spine. She had seen a lot in her 15 years on the force, but something about this case felt different, personal. The forensic team confirmed the impossible within 48 hours. The fingerprints matched Nora's old-school ID records. DNA samples confirmed the same. What remained in her head and hands showed signs of careful dismemberment. Surgical precision, not random violence. Whoever did this wanted time to hide something or someone. Lisa drove to the Cole residence early the next morning. The air outside the house felt stale, like the walls themselves were keeping secrets. Trey Land answered the door wearing his uniform, as if pretending to be the grieving husband and the town's hero all at once. "Lisa, we need to talk, Chief." Trey Land, "It's about Nora. I already told y'all everything." "Lisa, then this won't take long." She followed him inside. The living room was spotless, too spotless. Every picture of Nora was gone from the shelves. Only his police commendations remained. Lisa's eyes lingered on the empty spots on the wall, where framed photos had clearly been removed. "Lisa, you clean up recently?" Trey Land couldn't stand seeing her face everywhere. "Hurts too much." "Lisa, or maybe it reminds you of what you did." For the first time, Trey Land's jaw twitched. The forensic unit moved in shortly after with a warrant. Within hours, they found faint traces of blood beneath a layer of newly polished floorboards in the garage. The luminol glowed blue under the UV light, like ghosts screaming from a wood. Lisa bent down, whispering to herself, "She fought you here, didn't she, Trey Land?" The following day, the department's tech analyst pulled up GPS data from Nora's smartwatch. Her heart rate spiked to 172 beats per minute at exactly 3:14 a.m., then flatlined 2 minutes later. The signal placed her inside the Cole residence. The same night, Trey Land told reporters he was working late. When confronted, he tried to brush it off. "Trey Land, that damn watch glitched. She must have dropped it." "Lisa, dropped it?" "Into your garage." Trey Land smirked but said nothing. He was too calm, too confident. That's what made Lisa furious. He believed his badge could shield him from justice. Over the next week, the evidence piled up. Surveillance footage showed his truck near the Mobile River at 4:02 a.m. the morning Nora left for Dubai. Gas receipts placed him at a station 30 miles south of the crime scene. The camera captured his face, sweat glistening under the fluorescent lights, eyes hollow. Still, he refused to confess. Meanwhile, the town turned against him. Reporters camped outside his house. Neighbors whispered that they'd heard noises from his garage at night, dragging sounds, water running for hours. But none had spoken earlier because, well, who dares accuse the sheriff? One of Nora's old friends, crying on camera, said, "She told me once she was scared of him. I should have called the police. God forgive me, I should have called." Lisa worked nonstop, driven by something more than duty. She saw in Nora the women who never got to speak for themselves. Wives silenced by love, by fear, by loyalty to men who didn't deserve them. Finally, one rainy afternoon, she received the call she'd been waiting for. Forensic pathologist. We've got the match. The rope fibers on the remains match the ones found in his garage. Lisa, that's it. Bring him in. When Treyland arrived at the station, the thunder outside shook the windows. Reporters shouted questions as he was led to the doors in cuffs. He looked at Lisa, still managing that chilling smirk. Treyland, you sure you got your killer, detective? Lisa, no doubt in my mind. She leaned closer, her voice low but firm. You were supposed to protect people, Treyland. Instead, you butchered the one who loved you most. He stared at her for a long moment before whispering, almost gently, You ever loved someone so much it scared you, detective? I did, and that's why she had to die. Lisa stepped back, cold spreading through her chest. His confession wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to end the charade. Enough to prove that beneath the uniform, the hero everyone admired was nothing more than a monster in disguise. As rain poured down over Montgomery, Treyland Cole was booked for first-degree murder. Outside the precinct, the crowd gathered in silence, holding candles for Nora Whitfield, the woman who once believed love could save her, and instead found her death in its shadow. By the time Treyland Cole's mugshot hit the evening news, the entire state of Alabama was watching. The young police chief with the movie star smile, the one who'd once lectured school kids about respect and morality, was now in an orange jumpsuit, accused of killing his 61-year-old wife. Detective Lisa Grant didn't care about the cameras. She cared about what she saw in the evidence room. A pattern, cold, deliberate, and calculated. Over the next few days, her team went through every inch of Treyland's life. His phone, his laptop, his bank accounts. Every secret he tried to bury. And what they uncovered was darker than anyone had imagined. It started with the financial trail. Nora's savings account, $250,000, had been transferred just weeks before her death to a company registered in Dubai, Amina Wellness Group. The address was fake, but the contact email wasn't. It led to a woman named Amira Said, a 24-year-old influencer who'd once posted photos with Treyland during his work trip the year prior. Lisa stared at the images on her monitor. Treyland shirtless on a yacht, his arm around Amira. The caption read, When love finds you in the desert, hold on tight. She muttered, Son of a bitch. The next morning, she brought the evidence to the DA's office. Lisa, he wasn't just cheating. He was laundering his wife's money through this woman. DA Paul Harrington, you're saying the Dubai trip wasn't hers. It was his? Lisa, exactly. He killed her, sent the money overseas, then staged her disappearance to make it look like she left him. The DA nodded grimly. Then we got motive. Meanwhile, Treyland sat in the county jail, calm as ever. When Lisa went to question him again, he greeted her with a smirk. Treyland, Detective Grant, you must miss me already. Lisa, I miss seeing people who don't lie to my face. Treyland, you're wasting your time. Nora left me. I didn't kill her. Lisa, then explain the blood in your garage, the wire transfer to Dubai, and your little beach getaway with Amira Said. For the first time, the smirk faltered. Lisa continued, You thought you were smart. You used your badge to clean up your mess. But you forgot one thing. Digital footprints don't lie. She dropped a folder on the table. Inside were screenshots of messages between Treyland and Amira. Treyland, once she's gone, we're free. Amira, I don't want her hurt. Treyland, you won't have to see it. He looked down, expression tightening. Those messages are fake. Lisa leaned closer. Then tell me why they came from your phone. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The hum of the fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Then, almost softly, he said, You think you know everything, but you don't know what it's like to love someone so much you can't breathe without them. Lisa, that's not love, Treyland. That's control. Outside, the press swarmed the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions. Did the sheriff confess? Where's the rest of the body? Was it about money or love? But Lisa ignored them all. She knew the story wasn't about greed alone. It was about ego, A man who couldn't stand losing control over the woman who once worshipped him. Days later, Interpol sent back confirmation. Amira said it was real, and she was in custody in Dubai. Her emails matched Treyland's bank activity. She told investigators that Treyland promised her a life of luxury, paid for by Nora's investment. Amira, he said she'd agreed, that she wanted to help us. I didn't know she was dead until I saw the news. Lisa read the transcript and felt a hollow ache. Nora had never stood a chance. She'd been played by the man she trusted and used by the woman who didn't even know her name. When the lab results came in, they sealed Treyland's fate. Nora's blood matched the stains found in the garage, and tiny fragments of her skin tissue were trapped inside his truck's trunk lining. Lisa walked into his holding cell, holding the final report. Lisa, game's over. Treyland, you sure? Lisa, dead sure. He looked up, eyes cold and glassy. You think locking me up brings her back? Lisa, no, but it means she finally gets a rest. As the door shut behind her, Lisa took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like justice was starting to breathe. When the call from Interpol came through, Detective Lisa Grant was sitting in her office, staring at Nora's wedding photo pinned to the evidence board. The photo was sun-faded, edges curling, but Nora's smile still glowed with that kind of hope only love can create and destroy. Interpol agent, Detective Grant, we detain Amira said in Dubai. She's agreed to talk. Lisa, put me through. A few seconds later, the screen flickered to life. The woman on the other end was stunning. Dark hair, flawless makeup, the kind of beauty that photographs can't quite capture. But her eyes were red and swollen, rimmed with guilt. Lisa, Miss said, I'm Detective Grant from Alabama. You know why I'm calling. Amira, softly, yes, because of him. Amira's voice trembled. She said she met Treyland 2 years ago on a security seminar trip in Dubai. He told her he was divorced, alone, rebuilding his life. He wore his badge like a symbol of virtue, and she believed every word. Amira, he said I made him feel alive again. He told me she was sick, that she couldn't travel, that she wanted him to move on. I didn't know she existed, at least not like that. Lisa, he used you. Amira, he used both of us. Amira revealed that the Mina Wellness Group was Treyland's idea, a fake company meant to funnel Nora's savings into a Dubai bank account. He convinced Amira to open the account under her name, promising they'd start a new life together once the situation was handled. Lisa's stomach turned. Handled. The word sat heavy in her chest. Lisa, did he ever talk about hurting Nora? Amira, pausing, he said she'd never let him go, that she was too controlling, too proud. One night, he said, sometimes the only way to start over is to erase the past. I thought he was just angry. As Amira spoke, Lisa watched her facade crumble. The glamorous exterior was gone. What sat before her was a frightened young woman who'd been seduced by charm and fed lies until those lies turned bloody. Amira, the morning after he flew back to Alabama, he called me. He sounded calm, too calm. He said, it's done. I'll see you soon. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. When Lisa asked why she hadn't come forward sooner, Amira broke down completely. Amira, because I loved him. Because I didn't want to believe what I already knew. Do you understand what it's like to love someone capable of murder? Lisa, yes, she said quietly. More than you think. After the call, Lisa sat alone in her office, the glow from the monitor painting her face in cold blue light. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. Money, motive, opportunity, and now, confession by proxy. But it didn't make her feel victorious. It made her feel hollow. That evening, she walked down to the holding area. Treyland was sitting on his cot, writing something in a notebook. He looked up as she entered. Treyland, you've been busy, detective. Lisa, I spoke to Amira. Treyland grinning faintly. Did she cry? Lisa, she told me everything. The fake company, the money, the plan. Treyland, then I guess you got what you need. Lisa crossed her arms. What I need is the truth. You could have walked away. Treyland. She would have let you, but you chose blood. He leaned forward, his voice a low murmur. Treyland, you ever loved someone who made you feel small, detective? Like you owed them your soul? Nora did that to me. She made me feel like a project. I wanted her to see me as a man, not a kid she rescued. Lisa, so you killed her for pride? Treyland, coldly, I killed her because she wouldn't let me live. Lisa stood still, forcing down the nausea rising in her throat. For the first time, she saw him not as a monster, but as a hollow man who mistook control for love. Lisa, you could have chosen freedom. Instead, you chose a coffin for both of you. She turned to leave, but he called after her. Treyland, Detective Grant, tell Amira I forgive her. Lisa, without turning back, she doesn't need your forgiveness. You need hers. When the door closed, Treyland was left in silence, just the echo of his own breath and the creak of the metal cot. Outside, the storm clouds over Montgomery began to clear, and the first light of dawn slipped through the window of Lisa's car as she drove home. For the first time in months, she felt the faintest sense of peace, not because justice had been served yet, but because the truth had finally started to speak. The courthouse in Montgomery had never seen a crowd like this. Reporters lined the marble steps, cameras flashing under the blistering Alabama sun. Inside, the air buzzed with whispers, judges, jurors, neighbors, all waiting to see the rise and fall of a man they once called hero. State of Alabama versus Treyland Cole. The young police chief accused of murdering his wife, dismembering her body, and faking her disappearance overseas. Detective Lisa Grant took her seat behind the prosecution table, next to District Attorney Paul Harrington, a tall, gray-haired man with the calm precision of someone who'd put away killers for 30 years. Across from them sat Linda Parker, Treyland's defense attorney, poised and sharp in a navy blue suit. Between them sat Treyland himself, hands cuffed, wearing a crisp white shirt and a face that showed no regret. When the judge called for silence, the room fell still. Judge Morrison, Mr. Harrington, you may proceed with your opening statement. Paul rose, buttoned his jacket, and faced the jury. Paul, this case isn't about an affair. It isn't about money. It's about control. It's about a man who wore a badge by day and by night became the very evil he was sworn to stop. He walked toward the jurors, holding up a photograph of Nora smiling in her classroom. Paul, she was a teacher, a mentor, a wife. She believed in love's second chances. But the man she trusted turned that belief into her death sentence. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. When it was Linda Parker's turn, she stood with a calm smile. Linda, ladies and gentlemen, what the state calls control, I call heartbreak. Treyland Cole is not a monster. He's a broken man who loved too deeply and lost his way. The prosecution will show you numbers, receipts, and digital data, but love doesn't fit into spreadsheets. She turned toward Treyland. Linda, he didn't plan this. He snapped. And that doesn't make him evil. It makes him human. The trial stretched for days. Witnesses came and went, neighbors, bank officers. Even the Interpol agent who'd interviewed Amira said. Each piece of evidence layered over the next like a brick wall. Closing in, Lisa testified for nearly 2 hours, her voice unwavering as she described the blood patterns in the garage, the GPS data, the forged wire transfers. Then came the moment that silenced the room. The playback of Treyland's own voice, recovered from the smart doorbell outside his house. If you leave me, Nora, you won't get far. I'll make sure of that. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Treyland's jaw tightened, his calm mask slipping for the first time. Paul Harrington stepped forward. Paul, that's not love speaking, ladies and gentlemen. That's possession. That's the sound of a man deciding who gets to live and who doesn't. When Amira took the stand, she was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled as she clutched the microphone. Amira, he told me it was done. He said we'd start over somewhere no one would judge us. I didn't know he meant she was dead. Treyland stared at her coldly, his lips curling into a faint, bitter smile. Treyland, quietly. To himself, you knew enough. The prosecutor caught it, and the jury did too. By the time closing arguments came, the The courtroom felt like a church before judgment. Paul's voice carried with the weight of every woman who'd ever been silenced by a man claiming to love her. Paul, Nora Whitfield didn't die because of a crime of passion. She died because her husband believed she was his property. But in this courtroom, she will finally belong to justice. When the gavel struck, the jury was dismissed for deliberation. Hours turned into nearly 2 days. Reporters speculated. Crowds waited outside. Candles flickered in Nora's honor along the courthouse fence. On the third morning, the jurors filed back in. Their faces were pale, solemn, heavy with what they carried. Judge Morrison, has the jury reached a verdict? Foreman, we have, Your Honor. The courtroom held its breath. Foreman, we, the jury, find defendant Traylan Cole guilty of murder in the first degree. A collective gasp swept the room. Lisa closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Not from victory, but from exhaustion. Traylan sat still, unmoving. Then, slowly, he looked toward the gallery, toward the photo of Nora placed beside a candle, and whispered, almost too low to hear, I told her she wouldn't leave me. The bailiffs moved in. As they led him away, the chains on his wrists clinked softly, like the sound of justice finally breathing again. Outside, the skies over Montgomery broke open with light rain, washing the courthouse steps clean. For the first time in months, Nora's story wasn't one of silence. It was one of truth. When the gavel came down, it sounded like thunder inside the courtroom. For a moment, no one moved. The word guilty hung in the air, heavy, final, irreversible. Then, like a slow wave, whispers broke out across the gallery. Reporters rushed to the doors. Jurors wiped away tears, and family members of Nora clasped each other's hands, trembling with relief and sorrow. Detective Lisa Grant didn't speak. She just watched Traylan Cole as deputies secured his cuffs and led him from the defense table. The man who once stood for law and order now wore the face of defeat. But even in defeat, there was a strange stillness to him, as if he'd accepted his fate long before the jury ever spoke. Judge Morrison, Mr. Cole, the state of Alabama finds you guilty of first-degree murder. You are hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. A hush fell. Lisa caught her breath. She'd heard that sentence a dozen times in her career, but it never felt as heavy. Maybe because this time, the condemned was someone who once called himself her brother in blue. Traylan didn't flinch. He simply looked up at the judge and said, in a low, steady tone, Traylan, I understand, Your Honor. Maybe it's what I deserve. Then he turned, his eyes scanning the courtroom until they landed on the framed photo of Nora that sat near the jury box. A simple portrait of her laughing, taken on her 61st birthday. Traylan, she used to say love could heal anything. Guess she never met me. The bailiff tightened his grip on Traylan's arm and guided him toward the back door. Cameras flashed, capturing the image that would run on every news station that night. The disgraced police chief, shackled, had lowered, walking toward eternity. Outside, as the courthouse emptied, the crowd began to applaud, not with joy, but with gratitude. For Nora, for truth, for the idea that even power and a badge couldn't bury justice forever. Lisa stepped outside into the cool drizzle. The rain carried the scent of wet asphalt and magnolia leaves. She tilted her head up, eyes closed, letting the drops mix with her tears. For months, she'd chased evidence, stared at photos of death, lived inside the mind of a killer. But now, standing under that soft Alabama rain, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Release. Reporters surrounded her within minutes. Reporter, Detective Grant, what do you think about the verdict? Lisa, it doesn't bring her back, but it reminds the rest of us why we fight. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about peace. Her voice cracked on that last word. She didn't stay to answer more questions. She just walked down the courthouse steps and kept going past the flashing lights, past the crowd, until the noise faded behind her. That night, she drove by the Mobile River. The police tape was gone, but she could still see the spot where the suitcase was found, where the lies had ended and the truth began. She parked her car, stepped out, and laid a single white rose at the water's edge. Lisa, whispering, "You can rest now, Nora," He can't hurt you anymore. Somewhere across town, in a concrete cell, Treyland lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. A faint smile goes across his face, not from peace, but from something far darker, remembrance. He whispered into the darkness. She said she'd leave me. I told her she wouldn't. The guards ignored it, thinking he was talking in his sleep. But for Treyland, those words were a prayer twisted into confession. Back at the river, lightning cracked in the distance, and rain began to fall harder, washing over the roads, over the rocks, over the traces of story that had left the whole town scarred. Lisa watched the water ripple and thought of all the women like Nora, women who believed love could change a man, women who stayed one day too long. She turned back toward her car, her reflection glimmering in the wet pavement. For the first time, she didn't feel haunted. She felt purposeful. Justice isn't about punishment, she whispered to herself. It's about remembering who deserves peace. As she drove away, the dawn began to break over Montgomery. The rain softened, the river quieted, and in that fragile morning light, it felt, just for a second, like Nora was finally free. In the weeks after the verdict, Montgomery returned to its uneasy quiet. The flashing lights disappeared. The reporters left town, and life moved on, at least on the surface. But the air still carried the weight of Nora Whitfield's story, like a ghost that refused to fade. At the old elementary school where she once taught, someone placed fresh flowers on her desk every morning. Former students stopped by, leaving notes that read, "You made me believe in myself, Mrs. Whitfield." The staff kept her nameplate on the door, refusing to replace it. They said it reminded them that kindness, no matter how small, could outlive tragedy. Detective Lisa Grant drove past that school often. Sometimes she'd park across the street and just watch the kids running the playground, their laughter rising above the wind. It reminded her that even after horror, life insists on continuing. But she didn't sleep well. Nights brought the same dreams. Nora's eyes staring back at her from that photo on the evidence board, Treyland's smirk in the interrogation room, the sound of the gavel echoing through the courtroom. Justice had been served, yes, but it hadn't healed the wound. It never did. One morning, as she poured coffee in the precinct break room, a rookie officer asked, "Rookie, Detective Grant, does it ever get easier? Cases like that?" "Lisa, no," she said quietly. "And if it does, that's when you should quit." The department moved on to new investigations, new crimes, new monsters. But for Lisa, the case lingered. It wasn't just another file. It was a mirror. She'd seen a version of herself in Nora, a woman who wanted to believe love could fix what was already broken. 2 months later, she received an envelope at her office. No return address. Inside was a letter written in careful, blocky handwriting. "Detective Grant, you don't have to visit me, but I need you to know something. I never hated Nora. I just couldn't stand being invisible. Every time she looked at me, I saw the boy she wanted me to be, not the man I was. Maybe that's what love does. It builds you up just to crush you under its weight. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want someone to remember I wasn't always a monster. Treyland Cole." Lisa read the letter twice, her stomach turning. There was no apology, no remorse, just a broken man trying to rewrite his story before death could claim it. She folded the letter neatly and placed it in Nora's old case file. "You don't get the last word," she whispered. Later that week, she drove to the Mobile River again. The county had installed a small memorial there. Nothing grand, just a marble plaque etched with Nora's name and a quote from her diary. "Love without freedom isn't love, it's prison." A small crowd had gathered, teachers, students, townspeople. They lit candles and stood in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Lisa stayed behind after everyone left, watching the water turn gold, then black. She thought about how easily people fall for illusions. The perfect marriage, the charming uniform, the promise that love can save us from loneliness. Nora had believed all of that, and it had cost her everything. Lisa took out her notepad and wrote a single line. "Justice doesn't erase pain. It teaches us how to live with it." When she returned home, she placed that line inside her desk drawer beside a photo of her late husband. She'd lost him years ago to a drunk driver, and for a long time, she'd blamed herself. But tonight, she felt something different, a strange kind of peace. Maybe Nora's story had taught her that love, even in its most painful form, still mattered because it reminded people to feel. That night, as thunder rolled softly outside, Lisa finally slept without dreams. Across town in a death row cell, Treyland Cole sat in silence, staring at the concrete wall. He wasn't reading, wasn't praying, just thinking. When the guard asked if he needed anything, he said, "Treyland, no, I already got what I deserve." Outside, rain began to fall again over Alabama, gentle and constant, washing over the river where Nora once disappeared, and over a town that would never forget her name. A year after the trial, the town of Montgomery gathered once again. Not in a courtroom this time, but along the quiet banks of the Mobile River. The city council had approved a small memorial in Nora Whitfield's honor, a bronze statue of a woman standing barefoot at the edge of the water, her face lifted toward the horizon, her hands open as if releasing something invisible. The plaque beneath read, "For every woman who loved too deeply, trusted too freely, and paid the price for someone else's pain. You are seen, you are remembered." The crowd stood in silence as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in amber and rose. Former students, church members, and neighbors placed white roses at the base of the statue. Some cried quietly. Others smiled through tears, remembering the teacher who always said, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's courage that doesn't need an audience." Detective Lisa Grant stood near the back, hands folded, her badge tucked away. She wasn't there as an officer today. She was there as a woman who had carried Nora's story in her bones for far too long. The wind lifted her hair as she watched the water glimmer beneath the fading light. It looked peaceful now, like the river had forgiven itself for what it once held. A reporter approached her gently. "Reporter, Detective Grant, you led the investigation that brought justice for Nora. What does this day mean to you?" "Lisa, it means she didn't die for nothing. It means the truth still matters, even when love goes wrong." The reporter lowered his camera, visibly moved, and stepped back, leaving her alone with her thoughts. A choir from Nora's old church began to sing "Amazing Grace." The melody carried over the water, soft and trembling. As Lisa listened, she remembered the first night she'd walked into Nora's house. The faint smell of lilies, the warmth of her teaching award still hanging on the wall, the echo of a woman who'd only ever wanted peace. After the ceremony, Lisa lingered long after the crowd had gone. The river was quiet except for the sound of cicadas in the trees. She knelt by the statue, running her fingers along the engraved words. "You are remembered." Lisa, whispering, "You really are, Nora." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out Treyland's letter, the one he'd written from death row. She hadn't opened it again since the day she'd filed it away. But now, under the fading sunlight, she unfolded it one last time. "Detective Grant, they set my execution date. I keep thinking about that night, about what I said to her before it happened. I told her she'd never leave me. I wish I'd told her she could. Tell them I wasn't born a monster. I just didn't know how to let love go." Lisa stared at the letter for a long time. Then she tore it in half, letting the pieces drift into the water. "You don't get to define her story," she said quietly. "Not anymore." The fragments floated away until they vanished beneath the current. When Lisa finally turned to leave, she saw a group of young women standing at the edge of the pier, holding candles. They couldn't have been more than 20, but their faces were solemn, their eyes fierce. One of them spoke softly. "We started a foundation in her name, the Nora Project. It's for women trying to leave abusive relationships." Lisa smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. That's exactly what she would have wanted. As the candles flickered in the dark, Lisa looked back one last time. The statue shimmered under the streetlights, and for a brief, breathtaking moment, she swore she saw Nora standing there, alive, radiant, finally free. "Lisa, softly, you found your sunrise, old friend." The wind swept through the reeds, carrying her words out over the river. The water moved gently, reflecting the moonlight like 1,000 tiny prayers. And just like that, the story that began with betrayal and ended in blood transformed into something greater, a promise that love, even broken and bruised, can still leave light behind. In Montgomery, people still tell Nora Whitfield's story, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a warning and as a testament that love should never cost you your life. And as long as that river keeps flowing, her name will never be forgotten.